On the podcast today, we are going to dissect chapter 17 of the Tao Te Ching, which is the 17th episode of the 81 meditations on the Tao Te Ching. And as usual, Guyang will read Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation, and I will read Derek Lin's translation. So without further ado.
Very few are aware of the highest. Then comes that which they know and love. Then that which is feared. Then that which is despised. Those who do not trust enough will not be trusted. When actions are performed without unnecessary talk, people say, "We did it."
The highest rulers, people do not know they have them. The next level, people love them and praise them. The next level, people fear them. The next level, people despise them. If the ruler's trust is insufficient, have no trust in them. Proceeding calmly, valuing their words, task accomplished, matter settled, the people all say, "We did it naturally." So this chapter is about the 4 levels of leadership we find in the world. One leadership is mysterious to the world, and the other 3 we all know too well. And so, especially in this day and age,
Yes.
we know the other 3 leaderships, well, let's say the bottom 2 leaderships very well in the modern world. Mm-hmm. And so, first of all, we'll start off with sort of the highest type of leadership, as it explains, which is a transcendental leadership, right? It's a leader who leads naturally, or we could relate that to a wise sage. So to lead from behind.
Yes.
They don't have to advertise their leadership.
Just like when we wear perfectly fitting shoe or perfectly fitting your like belt or something like that you don't even recognize it's there, but they do the job. Right? Mm-hmm. So again, that is the highest level of leadership. You sometimes wouldn't even recognize there is a such thing as a leader in a community or a society, but just things are just function just fine without any interference.
Exactly. I remember, I've mentioned it before, Richard Wilhelm in his translation of the I Ching explained in his commentary how Westerners particularly are curious about this type of leadership, like how do they really lead? And Richard Wilhelm said that even though the sage is on top of a mountain doing the spiritual work and living with nature in harmony with nature, though people in the city think that they're doing really nothing, but the fact of the matter is they're creating incomparable human values for the future.
Yes.
Without even intentionally doing so. And the evidence of that is we still talk about Lao Tzu. We still talk about Gautama the Buddha, Shankara, and Gaudapada, and all of these great sages who weren't eager to change the world in some sense, like Confucius was, who kind of operates from the next level of leadership, a more like a virtuous level, but still trying to impose some sort of system on other people. And so we still talk about these sages, and they, Lao Tzu just left society, yes, if we take the story literally. Mm-hmm. And Zhuangzi himself didn't advertise any type of leadership, but he dwelled in society, and people gravitated towards him and his philosophy and this and that without him intentionally doing so. He didn't have to put posters up and so forth,
What's beautiful thing about this leadership, highest level of leadership, is that things get done or people are getting guided in a right direction without them even realizing it. That's something beautiful about it.
Yep.
Right? Just like a force of water in a beautiful water stream. Like, again, the force behind the flow of water is Tao, the invisible force, right? Yep. But Tao not trying to be like important and take all the attention, but the water just flows where it's supposed to go. So the element of water itself doesn't know it's been guided, but it just goes where it's supposed to go, right? So that's naturally, yes, that's beautiful thing about it.
Yeah, and this is why the sage or the natural leader has humility, and true humility, because humility is a good representation of water, right? Water seeks the low places, but paradoxically is the most powerful force in nature.
Yeah.
Same as humility. We even though people incorrectly assume they equate humility with humiliation, particularly in the West, it's not really the case. No. Humility is a strength, and humility always seeks the low places, but paradoxically is the most powerful force in nature and can change the world. Someone who is really humble, not like Uriah Heep and Charles Dickens' book.
Story.
Yeah, so you're not. It's not an unctuous humility. It's a real, honest humility that can change the world. And the sage and the natural leader have that, and that's why people gravitate towards them. In my book, The Science and Practice of Humility, I talk about that kind of invisible power that a sage has. I use Ramana Maharshi as a good example. He didn't go out and put posters up like we find in Tiruvannamalai, where people are putting posters up about their satsangs these days.
Come and see me.
Come and see me, like I'm enlightened, whatever. And so he didn't have to do that. Paul Brunton and these people who came from other countries, and that actually there was a gravitational pull there. Yeah. You don't want to make that too metaphysical, but there really is something to it, right? That sort of humility and silence and contentment has a power, and as you said, it tends to influence the people, and it's better for the people around them. That's why they say, particularly in India, for example, in the Upanishads, to sit near a master is very beneficial because of that reason. It's infectious. The way they are, their wisdom, it has a positive effect on you if you're in their physical presence.
Yes. Yeah, we know that firsthand. Is a very powerful energy there. Like when we visit Ramana Maharishi ashram in Tiruvannamalai, for example, just being in this space, although he's passed away a long time ago, but his presence is still there. He still lives on in the mountain of Arunachala, right? So that's why still so many devotees still live there, Indians and foreigners, and still there's that powerful energy. Yeah.
I remember a lady said to me once, you kind of get darshan from Ramana when you go to Arunachala and Ramana Ashram. A lot of people will think that's kind of metaphysical hocus pocus, but if you haven't experienced it, then it's hard to make that sort of assessment. But I would recommend everyone go and do that. But that's kind of that sagely quality, that it's kind of an unknown and unseen power that these leaders have without drawing any attention to themselves.
Yes.
And so that's kind of where we lead into sort of the next level of leadership, isn't it?
Yes. So the leadership that seeks more sort of loyalty and affection.
Yes.
So in this case, it's more so like a virtuous leadership. So a leader himself or herself want to get good reputation from people and the loyalty, so that trying to do the right things and good things to become a good leader.
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned Confucius before, right? Like, even though Taoism is a critique of Confucianism, you could say Confucius, in some sense, wasn't a bad guy, right? Like, his heart was kind of in the right place, but he was, from the Taoist perspective, he was confused because he had a system that he thought would work for everybody.
Yes.
And if you look at the teachings even of Jiddu Krishnamurti, right, Jiddu's highly critical of any system at all, because if you have a system, it means you can't live naturally, like, because you have an artificial external system imposed on yourself. And this is classical Taoism. This is classical Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi. Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi were explaining that in the Warring State period of China, but they were also practicing their own form of spiritual practice as well. So they didn't have to tell everybody about it. But Confucius had this urge to promote his system of philosophy because in his eyes, he thought that it was good for everyone. And somehow he had this perspective that you can induce the Tao, which is diametrically opposed to Taoism, because the Tao is naturally there. You don't induce it. And this is where the carving and polishing metaphor and the uncarved block metaphor came about, right? Lao Tzu is saying you should stick to the uncarved block, just let nature be as it is. And Lao Tzu is kind of part of the self-cultivation method. Like, we need to cultivate ourselves and use my system to become better people.
I think Confucius's intention was, at the right place. I think because society was getting larger and larger, so he felt like they needed some kind of a social structure and system to follow by to create harmonious community, harmonious society, right? So that he built his own system. But again, Laozi's point of view, it's still not natural completely.
Well, that's where the problem is. It's artificial.
Yes.
And so when you have an artificial system, it doesn't apply to everyone. It might apply to Confucius himself.
Right.
But who's to say his personal agenda is best for everybody? The Taoist perspective is that nature is perfect for everybody because nature is nature. You are nature itself. And Taoism is saying, actually, you shouldn't fight your natural inclinations. You should lean into them and not be at odds with your own humanity. And again, this idea that we need a system naturally means that we are at odds with our own humanity. Because we're not accepting ourselves as we are, and this develops subtly dissociative psychology. Like we have there's many dissociative disorders in the world.
How people don't feel they belong to the whole,
they
to
don't,
nature.
Yeah, and they don't accept themselves as they are. Like this is my physical body, this is who I am, this is my gender, and so forth and so on. This is how I think, and so this is just what nature has given you. And it's a blessing.
Yes.
We are taught, though, in this world that it's not a blessing. You should be like this. You need to mold yourself into this character. And then you become at odds with your own humanity. And so you develop this dissociative psychology. And people don't talk about this because it's kind of a sensitive topic to talk about in this day and age. But it should be spoken about because a lot of people are becoming more dissociative. A lot more mental health issues are arising because of it. And as people know from my work, particularly like in Fasting the Mind and Effortless Living and these types of books, is that Taoism and Eastern spirituality in general is a way to heal mental health issues. But you won't hear the psychiatrists or the psychologists talk about this because it means you have to kind of transcend your identity. You have to transcend the systems that you've been inculcated with.
Yes.
The socialization process that we've all endured.
Yes. We talk about this a lot privately. Psychology and psychologists trying to help you in a still realm of this materialized world, meaning, like you said, about the identity. The identity is still there as in kind of ego, like me as a person in the society. So what they will tell you is how to manage your situation under a certain circumstance that you are in as this person, as this identity. But the very problem is that the identity itself is the problem.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Taoism or Vedanta Hinduism especially, their focus is on how to transcend this identity, right?
Yep.
So transcending at a non-dual level of identity.
Yeah.
So when you go deeper into that, then you completely transcending the current situation, this manifested reality.
Yeah.
So from that higher perspective, things become much more clear, and things kind of fall into place. So you have better perspective of yourself as well when you identify yourself as this person. Then you can see yourself what was wrong when you were at that level of person identity.
Yeah. Well, the psychologist wants you to remain in the prison of the identity and thinks that things can be resolved in the prison. And you've got a lion inside the prison with you. And that is all the trauma and all the suffering that you've endured. And they think that that is just going to go away. And we've all had different levels of trauma. I mean, if you've had just a minor level of trauma, sure, you can remain in that prison of identity and probably heal that. But if you've had real visceral trauma,
Yes.
sexual abuse or whatnot, you know what I mean? I mean, that's a tough one. It's a tough sell because to try and befriend that lion in the prison and remain in that prison is very difficult. And so Taoism, Vedanta, Buddhism, they give you the keys to escape the prison and to develop a distance from the lion in the prison. And then you can understand it a little bit better. But we're not allowed to talk about this again because it destroys the whole psychology industry. You know, it's you know, from a psychological perspective, they're saying you're not accepting it. It's like, no, you are accepting it because you're letting the line there, you're leaving the line there, but you're not just identifying with it, and you're not trying to hold on to it and trying to work it out. And sometimes when there's no outward reconciliation with the people who've done wrong by you, it's hard to heal certain trauma. This is what psychologists and psychiatrists don't talk about because that would, you know, end their business, obviously. So, but this is the importance of following the Eastern paths,
yes.
you know. So, and to get back to what we are speaking about, these systems that are imposed by even virtuous leaders such as Confucius are problematic.
Yes.
Because it creates institutionalized inferiority complex amongst people. And even though that is very visible in East Asia, that institutionalized inferiority complex is actually all around the world because we feel inferior to an overarching government, a social system, a culture, a religion, and we suffer because of it, you see? And that's why in Taoism, can be translated as the virtue of the non-virtuous. So the first level of leadership, where virtue on its own is the third level of, the second level of leadership, that Confucius would follow. Or, you know, we spoke before the podcast, Abraham Lincoln, or someone like pious and virtuous of that. Now, it's not that they're bad people, right? They're trying to do what is good
What's right for everyone.
What's right for everyone. And I admire that, you know. Like, I look at someone like Narendra Modi and I admire someone like him, you know, juggling such a difficult job. I don't envy them to do that job, trust me. But that's the things, that's what happens when you have a system in place. You know, it creates this institutionalized inferiority complex that we all live with. And that kind of subtle suffering a lot of people in the world, you know, have.
And what I find it funny is that, because that's where this schism within individual comes into place, because they don't tell you that you naturally belong, because you are nature. You are from nature. You can never escape from nature. But because of this social structure and system that built all around us, trying to keep you in a certain way and mold you in a certain way to be a certain individual, to make you feel belong to this society, right? But what happens is that, what if that culture and society doesn't fit you then, right? But first thing that would happen is that you wouldn't question culture or social system itself, I think. You would doubt yourself first, I think. Then that's when the dissociative psychosis actually begin, I think. You trying to kind of find the answer why you don't feel fit to this world. But instead of you are asking the right question, which would be questioning a social system and culture itself, but you would put the blame on yourself, or why am I like this, or am I something wrong with me, or this and that. But again, that already builds a wall between nature and the individual, right? So you instantly don't have the feeling of that you are belong to nature. So what happens is that nowadays we see a lot in the younger generation is that they dress certain way, they change their attitude or even appearance to try to fit to this trend of society, right? The other way around.
Other way around, yeah.
But we should actually question culture and the structure and system, and that's what Lao Tzu actually would support, right?
Yep.
You should question, the culture. The culture might be, again, like what the famous saying from Terence McKenna: "Culture is not your friend."
100%.
So maybe there's something wrong with the culture itself. Maybe we are perfectly fine.
We are perfectly fine. That's why Lao Tzu would kind of scoff at the younger generation at the moment who try to fit into the culture itself and change their appearance, because all of that is coming from, in some sense, from a sense of insecurity because you feel like you don't belong. So you're trying to belong. And Lao Tzu is saying, you naturally belong, you're nature. You have this meat suit, it gets old like a tree, and it passes away and it becomes food for worms. It's actually a beautiful thing. When I was younger, I used to really, be a bit anxious about getting old and looking a certain way. But now, from where I am now, there's actually a bit of beauty to it. Because you grow old gracefully. It's a path of nature. We all go through the process. It's a beautiful thing if you have a distance from it, a distance from the idea that your ego will eventually disappear in time. We're more so concerned about that than really the body, to be honest.
True.
But again, this idea of systems and making people be fearful of not being part of it and saying to you that you don't belong, you need to abide by this thing, kind of leads into the third level of leadership, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So again, the leadership under kind of legalism.
Yep.
Which is like people that the government or the leadership that make people to be fearful of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. It's to rule by fear, right? And
yes.
We're all very familiar with ruling by fear, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
So these last two levels of leadership are actually kind of connected, but we'll speak about them on their own. So to rule by fear, and we all know this one, right? So this is like a leader who uses tyrannical oppression and, will ruthlessly eliminate their opponent or anyone who is in opposition to them. And we see that in this day and age, right? If someone doesn't buy into a certain narrative that the mainstream is trying to promote, they are constantly eliminated and ostracized, and it's completely unjust.
Mm-hmm.
It is morally reprehensible, and only those with their eyes open can see that. But this is not something new. This type of leadership has always been around, and actually has been kind of the main operating system in politics, to rule by fear. It hasn't been actually the second one. We can only mention a few presidents who were really pious. We can only mention Confucius through kind of that period of time as someone who was a bona fide leader of the society. There's not many of those second leaders, the virtuous ones who are doing the work. But there's more so of these ones that rule by fear.
Yeah, rule by fear. Again, it's a reward and punishment kind of idea.
Yep.
And it may not look like it, but I think it's quite dictatorship-based, very tyrannical the way of leading people. It's all about control and with the coercion and oppression over people, right?
Yeah.
I see that actually, again, what's happening around the world, or just the style of politics all around the world, even last 100 or more years so around the world. Leadership has been this way. It may not look like it, like I said, but they invisibly shadow ban certain people online.
Yeah.
That's tyranny.
That's tyranny. That's censorship. Yeah, it's oppression.
You don't see who, let's say, for example, a Hitler kind of figure who is on your face and telling you what to do and what you can't do.
Yeah.
But that's very sneaky and clever way to do it, to do their own tyrannical control over people.
Yeah.
That kind of censorship, and they support certain narrative, support certain individuals, but they suppress some other real important information. They hide it from public and things like that. That's tyranny.
It's tyranny, yeah. The destruction of freedom of speech, particularly in America, it's a form of oppression. It is communism coming into America. And Americans are waking up to the fact that, in Australia too, a little bit, is that they've found themselves in a communist country. And it happened overnight, and it's because of certain tech companies, it's because of certain media organizations. And there's media organizations now, and people don't know this, but there's media organizations, a really famous media organization who has lost 90% of its viewership and are fighting for their survival. So they will make up any nonsense and will try to cancel and censor anybody who doesn't fit the main, or I shouldn't say the mainstream narrative, doesn't fit their narrative.
Yeah.
So that's a form of oppression. And if anyone has fallen for that, then you are for the destruction of freedom of speech. And if you are for that, that's your own prerogative. But there are countries that you can go to that don't have freedom of speech. So you can freely move to those countries in the world that are communist and you don't have freedom of speech. But I can tell you this, when those people go to those countries, they'll be wanting to return to America quick smart. But that's the power of ruling by fear. Something as simple as the freedom of speech, that is everyone's God-given right, freedom itself is being destroyed. That's the level that the rule by fear can get to, and it can affect the innocent person's heart. And it's actually beneficial to those leaders to do that.
Yes, of course. For them it is.
For them, of course, because they use fear to influence people. But the funny thing is that about these leaders is that eventually when they are exposed, not just the leaders, right? Like you can talk about media organizations or tech companies and that who are trying to destroy freedom and so forth and so on, and who go against democracy, for example. In the end, people are glad to leave those types of institutions and leaders. It's just the way it is. And that's what actually happens. When a government pushes you too far, man, we have the power. The people have the power. And it's only until the people wake up that things actually change and go back to being natural, when human rights are valued and freedom is valued and so forth and so on. So, but when the leader keeps going down that path, that's when they get into the lowest level of leadership, isn't it?
Yes, lowest leadership being that which is despised.
As I said, they leave them, right? They leave them. So that's why I'm saying, like, the two last leaderships are the same, basically, right? I mean, they're part and parcel, like.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, under the tyrannical government or leadership, people get tired in time, right? And in the end, eventually they all want to be free, right?
100%.
So they basically losing faith and trust in these leaders in the end, and they resent them, right? And they just walk away.
Exactly. And these leaders are completely incompetent. Like the funny thing is that with this lowest level of leadership, it can be summed up easily, right? It's someone who is in power that is unfit to lead. There are a lot of leaders right at this minute that we could say are unfit to lead. I won't mention any names, but these leaders are completely incompetent, and this is what Lao Tzu is trying to say, right? But the irony here is that these leaders always still have supporters in some section of society, some people who are still gullible and still fall for it. And this is why, in some sense, there's still no shortage of sycophants in the world who want to gain power. And that's a real deep form of psychosis. Right, a real deep form of psychosis. People who are brown-nosing these types of leaders to become a leader, and then they're eventually unfit to be a leader. Part of the whole ethos of this chapter is that a leader doesn't need to be elected. You are naturally a leader. It's actually your lead, it's your organic pattern.
Yes.
But this fourth level of leadership is full of sycophants who are trying to gain power, who are brown-nosing to get into a situation to become a leader, but they are completely unfit. They're not a natural leader.
They're really looking for the opportunity to make themselves a leader. And they're looking for attention. They're looking for, let's say, votes. They're looking for their fans, let's say. It's a popularity contest for them. For them, it's an egotistical drive to be a leader. Like, for them, it's just about the position itself. They think about what the job actually entails second. The second leader doesn't do that because they're naturally virtuous. They even though they are in the spotlight and they do evoke loyalty and so forth and so on, they know what the job entails. This last leadership, they don't really know what the job entails. They get into leadership
And
first.
they crap their pants. They're like, oh, geez, I've got all these problems to take care of and I don't really know how to do it.
Yeah, right.
So then the people naturally despise them, as Derek says in his translation.
Yeah, these sort of leadership often loses its real moral values, moral qualities, and become corrupted.
Yep.
Because again, they don't know how to really run administration most of the time, really.
No.
So in the end, really, at the end, fail people.
Well, look at the current situation that we've had the last 2 years, right? And ask yourself, seriously, did your leaders and government fail you in any way? That means they failed. If they failed you in any way, they failed. And did they handle the situation correctly? Well, that's a big one.
Time will tell.
Time will tell, right? And from what we see, no, most of them didn't handle the situation correctly. They didn't have calm, poise, equanimity, what you expect from a virtuous leader. They were frantic as anyone else. They bought into hysteria. They were not a leader.
Yes.
A leader itself, himself or herself, is willing to make the big calls that may go against the status quo.
Yes.
You might not know why they're doing something, but then down the road you see why it was beneficial that they actually did that. There are still some leaders in the world like that work in sporting organizations and so forth and so on. They make the big calls that people go, wow, like, I mean, what's he doing? He's not sort of falling in line with everybody else. And that's what a leader is.
Yes.
The natural leader doesn't fall in line with everyone else. They lead the pack. They don't follow the rest of the herds of cattle.
Yes.
They lead. And that's what Lao Tzu is saying a natural leader is. They lead. They don't have to like follow the trends of the time.
I think one of the most important qualities as a leader should have is that ability to be able to see the kind of future consequences of your own decision, right? If you make this decision, what was going to happen? Or if you make that decision, what would happen? Like this sort of ability to foresee the kind of future consequences. Because, again, I find it like a lot of leaders around the world have lost this looking to the distant future, you know, and they also moved and swept by this panic and hysteria, which is very poor quality.
That's not leadership, is it? Because a true leader doesn't get swept up with hysteria and panic. Lao Tzu's point is they're calm, they're equanimous. And so with that clarity, they know what is best for the people, or they at least have a plan for what is best, you know, because like what you said, when you do a cost-benefit analysis of, say, the current situation, if you do this action, right, on this side, there's going to be suicide, mental health problems, businesses going out, and so forth and so on. Can you live with that? You know, I'm not saying I don't envy any of these leaders that have had to handle this situation. But you have to do a proper cost-benefit analysis. You're not supposed to just move according to hysteria and panic, and just because that country does that, you do that. That's not what a leader does. No. You lead. You think for everyone.
Exactly.
So you do your best and you think for everyone. And unfortunately, the world that we live in at the moment, everything gets politicized and this and that, and it's hard for anyone to know what's right and wrong, and so it's a really tricky terrain for a leader. But in the end of the day, a leader still is calm and equanimous, and they are like a overarching grandmother or grandfather who sort of knows what's best for the family.
Exactly.
But we don't have many leaders like that, if at all.
I see a lot of leaders who have very like incompetent in like life experience. And also very weak mentally, I see. Because to make some bold decision, you've got to be a little bit bulletproof, to be honest.
Of course,
That's why you are in that position, right? That's your job, to stay strong mentally and just come with the right decision. And you might get criticized for that moment, but why should you care too much about it?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
If you're a leader, you shouldn't be like that.
So most of the great leaders that we've had throughout all of history have come from blue-collar environments. They haven't come from white-collar environments. That's an overgeneralization, right? But I'm saying there has been a lot that have come from blue-collar environments who were very virtuous people because they know what, like you said, ordinary life is like for the average person. And a lot of people who come from rich families and so forth are completely disconnected from the realities of everyday life. And if you're listening and watching, just like Guyang and I, you are from a blue-collar environment and you know the struggles that people have and that you've had personally. And so that's actually good fertilizer for future leaders, as opposed to being brought up in a white-collar family with a silver spoon in your mouth and then, you see the world from a rich person's perspective, not from a blue-collar perspective.
I mean, I would say like 95% of entire population around the world would be living like blue-collar people, like live week by week, month by month, pay your bills, pay your mortgage and whatnot, raise your children, this and that, right?
Good, honest, hardworking people.
Exactly. Really, 95%.
100%.
Yeah. But like, it seems like nowadays a lot of leaders coming out of the rest of the 5% who never lived the rest of 95% of life, really. So, it's a very important position who you pick.
Yes. And this is where we get into trust, right? Like it's a big theme of this chapter is actually trust. Because with all of these leaders, who can you trust? You obviously can't trust the last two. They're gone, right? Because first of all, you despise the last one. And the other one is ruling by fear. So it's really hard to trust someone who's tyrannical and oppressive. And so the theme here is that if the rulers themselves don't trust the people, how can you trust them? Trust is kind of reciprocal, right? It's not something that...
Yes.
Sometimes you have to earn trust.
Yes.
And particularly if you're a leader. And like I said before, a good leader knows the right way, even if it does go against the status quo or the trends of the time. And then when you see the fruition of their actions, the fruit of their actions, then you begin to trust them. And then the trust is reciprocal.
Yes.
So, but often in the world we don't trust the rulers because of their actions for everything that we've mentioned earlier.
Yeah, because leaders themselves don't trust people.
No.
Yeah, like here in this line saying, those who do not trust enough will not be trusted.
No.
So
think about yourself, right? Put yourself in a perspective. For everyone listening and watching, even you and I, are you a control freak? If you're a control freak, a good example of this is a backseat driver. We've all had backseat drivers, right? Like you're driving and the guy's like, oh, watch this, or oh, do that, and you're like, lacks trust. He has control issues, or she has control issues. And sadly, those sorts of people can become leaders as well. They have control issues.
yes.
And so if you have control issues and you are a backseat driver, you don't trust anyone. Because if you have an impetus for control, it means you don't trust. And a big theme in Taoism is trust. It's about allowing life to be as it will. This is what Wu Wei is, right? It's about allowing life to be as it will because you do trust nature. Now, does that mean that you won't ever intervene? That's not what I'm saying. There will be times where you might have to intervene,
Yes.
like we've had in the last 2 years. But most of the time you don't have to intervene. So, and most of us aren't backseat drivers, but there are some, right? 1 in 10 maybe. I don't know what the correct ratio would be.
Yeah.
But that's a good example to even ask yourself, am I a control freak? Am I a backseat driver? Am I always constantly trying to control the situation, control my situation? These are not good seeds for a leader. This is not a good habit or virtues that a leader actually will ever. Well, the bottom two leaders have these types of.
Well, that's why we maybe have most of leaders are going under that bottom two categories.
Yeah.
Lack of trust, being a backseat driver whole time.
Yeah, they're saying you trust me. I don't trust you, but you make sure you trust me.
You better listen to me. Yeah.
So that's why, if the rulers have insufficient trust, then you don't have any trust in them. That's the common theme here, right? Trust is reciprocal. And so Derek says in some of his translations, as when there is no trust, there is no team.
Mm.
So if we're talking about a collective humanity, if from the top doesn't have any trust, the people are not going to trust you, and you don't really have a solid team. There's no social cohesion. And what we're finding in Western countries nowadays, because of particular mind pathogens and stuff in the world, because of certain incompetent tech companies and media organizations, is that there's no social cohesion. There's no trust anymore.
Yeah.
But if you go to Asia, or you go to some countries in Africa, even Latin America, there's still social cohesion. Eastern Europe, in some countries, there's a lot of social cohesion where people do trust each other. They do trust the police, the government, and these things. But if you go to America, for example, there's no social cohesion at all. People don't trust anyone. They don't trust the cops. They don't trust the government. They don't trust their neighbor. There's no social cohesion, and that's a top-down system.
Well, that's why those Western countries or modern countries' society is such divided, isn't it? Like they just like arguing each other and over something that's really not necessary.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just creating more and more separation and creating more confusion to the world, and it's just a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, and the reason for it is the elephant in the room: social media. Social media has brought all of this division and that today, but we're not allowed to talk about it. Because if we talk about it, the tech companies cancel your opinion, and then everyone starts defending the technology. That's one of the strangest things that, as you know, that I've found in comments and that emails and that I've received because of my, my stance against social media. Even though I have social media too, right? But I have a distant relationship with it. I don't have a smartphone, and so, that's the elephant in the room. The reason why all this division and lack of social cohesion is because when we look at the trends of that starting, when did it start? When social media went on phones. Yeah. When did child suicide increase dramatically? Social media on phones. No one's going to talk about it. It's the elephant in the room. We love Facebook. Meta, I can't wait for Meta. And it's like, what are you talking about, man? This stuff is destroying the fabric of society. Yes. It's killing people.
What I really have a problem with the social media is that maybe not many people are seeing this, but what I clearly see is that it seems like that there is the world with social media and there is this world.
The real world, yeah.
And a lot of people kind of seem lost how to live in this real world because they spend so much time on the phone, on social media. So again, that creates a lot of disharmony, and people don't know how to communicate with one another in the reality. And there's tons of problem comes to this world, but they seem to care less about solving the real problem.
Yeah, of course,
because they find so comfortable and, peaceful in their own social media world, which just exists in your own mind and on a stupid phone, to be honest. But once the device disappears, that world doesn't exist. That's how simple and fragile that world is, really.
Yeah, for sure.
What lasts is this real world. This world, the natural world, is the only real. And people seem to have a lot of psychological problem that caused by social media and that only gets enhanced by social media, brings to this world. And they don't know how to handle it.
Yeah. You've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere, you know, and I think people will have to eventually, because the technology is becoming too invasive in our lives, and And it's taking us away from nature. I mean, Lao Tzu, he would definitely not be on social media. There's no doubt about it. So, I mean, if you're like everyone else, I'm assuming that everyone listening and watching is not for these growing trends of teen suicide, particularly with young girls. And it's getting younger and younger, like stories of 10-year-olds killing themselves because of what someone said on Facebook to them. They're not equipped to deal with that sort of environment. We've all been 10 years old. I couldn't have imagined having Facebook and Twitter and all of this nonsense at that age. And what do the tech companies do? They just go, well, it's not our fault. Not our fault that they kill themselves. And it's like, well, it's your platform that they used. They would not have been exposed to 1,000 people, so to say, as a 10-year-old without it. They could have only been exposed to their immediate environment. They're just a couple of their friends in the real world, right? Naturally how we live.
And such censorship, the algorithm that they created over the years, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
They promote certain information. They don't promote certain information. Even way they run the platform itself is not equipped for young people.
Yeah. Look at what they do to particular popular podcast hosts and stuff like that. They censor them. Look at what they do to Hindu channels. They just shut those channels down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's morally reprehensible and a destruction of freedom of speech. And it's. I mean, we're moving into this age of censorship. I mean, it's. But then when you put the spotlight on them and say, "What about all these kids killing themselves?" It's your fault. It's like that time when Ricky Gervais on the Golden Globes, when the Apple guy thought he was really cool, you know, and just sitting there,
Tuxedo
and then he just destroyed him. Oh, look at this woke Apple fellow sitting here, and then what about Foxborough in China? You had to put nets around the building because you were putting the Chinese people in sweatshops, and they were just jumping out of the building. They had to build actual nets around the building so that they didn't hit the pavement.
Don't die.
They don't die. So pious, aren't you? Such a progressive person. But we won't talk about the reality that's actually happening in other countries that are poorer. We'll keep that from everyone. People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to be real anymore. You know, that's the thing that we get on this channel, right? Because we talk about Taoism. Taoism is a path of realism. It's a path of authenticity and genuineness. And so when you be real, it strikes a nerve with people. You can't say those things anymore. It's like, I'm not PC. I can say whatever I want. I don't abide by censorship. You abide by censorship, but I don't play that game.
Yeah, I mean...
That's what leadership is, though, see? The leader does not abide by censorship, doesn't abide by political correctness. I'm not saying I'm a leader, but I'm saying other leaders. They don't abide by political correctness.
Nothing should bother them.
No.
Why should those things bother them and change their narrative?
Yeah.
That's not... Those people are not equipped to be a leader.
No.
Right.
No. Definitely not. And this is how you develop trust, actually, because most people are genuine. You know, the idea that this fringe minority in the world run the world is a really...
Oh, it's worrying.
you know, they don't... The reality is the majority of people are good, honest people with their faculties together and do operate with common sense. So when you see a leader who is a real leader, then you do have this reciprocal trust between the masses and the leader. Mm-hmm. And you can always tell a leader who is full of crap, right? Like, we all know that. Yeah. So in the last part of the chapter, we kind of get this framework of when we do trust a leader, of how everything just comes together. Yeah. It's kind of like that Tool song, you know, Schism. Maynard says, I know the pieces fit. It all fits together. Yeah, it's like that. I mean, in hindsight, sometimes from when you're in it, the pieces don't fit. But then when you look back with hindsight, you're like, oh, actually the pieces did fit. Yes. You know.
Again, that comes from that highest level of leadership.
Exactly.
Right? That's why when actions are performed without unnecessary talk, meaning when actions are performed, when all the pieces came together, without unnecessary talk, being staged, not taking credit, the real leader in the unknown leader, not taking any credit, people say, we did it. Not that to make people look a bit foolish, but here is to say that how the true leader don't take credit just for him or herself. No. The credit all goes to people and their hard work.
Yep.
So that leave them with such credit and achievement that which they have built, right?
Exactly.
And how they feel that we did it.
Yep.
So that under that sort of leadership, that the people feel that they have achieved for themselves, which brought the greater harmony within the community.
Yeah. In Australia, people probably don't know this game, but there's a game called Rugby League. It's probably the most popular game in Australia. And in the NRL, a lot of the leaders, the captains, will say, particularly there was a player, he's retired now, both one of our favourite players, Jonathan Thurston, and he was always usually the best player on the field. But this is proper leadership and humility in action, is when he would get interviewed after the game, kind of to what you were saying, oh, Jono, you did this and you did that. And he's like, no, all credit to the boys, It's a team effort.
It's almost every interview is like
predictable. Yeah, it's predictable.
That's the first line, but he really means it when he says,
yeah. He's humble.
Yes.
And then actually you started to see a trend with other captains. Now, all credit to the boys. And now it's just like a meme. Credit to the boys. Anything you do.
All thanks to the boys.
All thanks to the boys. All credit to the boys. But everyone knows he was the best player on the field. But a leader knows and doesn't take credit, because they know actually without everyone else it is impossible to have that cohesion together as a collective. It's impossible.
And it's funny thing that when other players get interviewed, like after a victory, for instance, then those players would give all the credit to Thurston being a captain, how he guided them in the right direction. Right. Yeah. As what a true leader should do.
That comes to the reciprocal trust. They can trust Jonathan, right? And then Jonathan can trust them. And so he would thank them, they would thank him.
Yes.
And so that's actually the synergy of how society can be. But we're tearing out the fabric of that.
Yes.
Sadly, in this day and age, where we can have pious leaders, virtuous leaders, but we're making up stories where we just don't trust anyone. That's the sort of society. Not everywhere. I shouldn't over-exaggerate. I should say in the West, people don't trust.
Yeah.
We've been to places in Africa and Asia, and people trust. They just trust each other. And so that reciprocal trust builds the Tao. That allows the Tao to move through the collective. This is the Taoan process. As you said, the leader doesn't have to claim their victory, because it's all happened, and even though they said that we did it, that makes the sagely leader very happy, because they don't have any bragging rights.
So at the end of the day, like after a victory, then all the pieces came together.
Yep.
Right. That the trust to each other.
Yep.
And then everything kind of worked as a unit, right, in perfect unison. And all things came together and they fit perfectly. Yep.
Because it's aligned with the Tao. And the thing is, to align with the Tao, right, is you can't do that through control. You have to trust. Isn't it funny that the sense of unity comes from trust? If you don't trust, you don't have a sense of oneness. It's funny, right? Because oneness, you understand that you're part of the Tao or Brahman or what have you. You understand at a deep level you're part of that. The other leaders, particularly the last two, don't feel like they belong. So they rule by fear, people despise them, and then we have the society we have today. But then when we trust and we understand that reality is fundamentally one, we have a subjective experience, but it's fundamentally one. We're all doing the best we can with the tools that we have at our disposal. Then we'll all get on with it and live our lives in a peaceful way, minding our own business and just wishing each other the best.
Yeah, I think nowadays, especially this kind of values and qualities should come from top to bottom. The leaders have to trust, starting to trust first.
Yes.
Instead of they themselves are guided by fear. Again, like you said, the bottom two categories of leaders are they themselves are fearful of something. That's why they want to control. They want to bring all these laws and the reward and punishment kind of control. governing people, governing a nation. But yeah, these leaders have to start trusting nature, trusting people, trusting the process, trusting the people who are around them, surrounded by, these things are, it's so important. Again, they have to start trusting people. That's how they gain the trust from people.
Yeah. Imagine if there was a leader during the last couple of years, instead of creating artificial division amongst society, which is morally reprehensible to create artificial divisions. Unnecessary. Instead of that, at the start of the situation that we've had, if a leader came out or had the cojones to come out and say, you know what, guys, you're all adults. You know how to take care of your family. You know how to go to work, and you know how to, behave yourself. I trust you guys to do that. You're adults.
Right.
You're adults. Imagine the different circumstance we would have, And a lot of people disagree because, what about this and what about that? And it's like, but you're still not trusting. People can take care of themselves when there is some type of threat. They are not all fools. You're assuming that the entire society is incompetent to behave and to take care of themselves. They know how to do that. You don't have to lock them up in a cage to pretend, to force them to behave.
Yeah.
They know how to behave. That's how we've been so successful as a species. If you want to understand that, read The Secret of Our Success by Joseph Henry. We have been a very successful species in creating society and this and that. Sure, we have our pitfalls and this and that, right? But there's a lot more optimism than pessimism when you look at the evolution of humanity.
We are still here, right?
We're still here. And we've got all of this crazy stuff around us. You and I doing this podcast and people are listening and watching. It's madness. If you go back 3,000 years ago and we told someone back then, they'd be like, get out of here.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even understand the concept of a microphone.
I don't think so.
No, because it's a foreign concept. Yeah. It happens through the success of our species, the success of the evolution of psychology and culture. And we don't highlight that, We don't highlight any of that. So imagine if the leaders through these last few years actually trusted people.
Again, like Sweden is a good example as a nation.
Yep.
They never really followed what every other country were doing, right?
No.
They did their kind of own thing, and now they, I would say, they're in a far better situation economically and politically than any other country around the world, because they kept their own, kept their own way.
Yeah. They had their own problems, obviously, but they, in some sense, trusted the population.
Yeah.
And, there's no right or wrong perspective during this period of time, but you have to do a proper cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth doing this action, which is going to cause all of these problems, just to solve this problem?
Right.
And when you do a proper cost-benefit analysis, as people have done, those actions shouldn't have taken place. And there's been numerous articles of the damages of that action, which we are talking about, which everyone knows, locked up in a cage. So what I liked about what you said with Sweden is at least they had the cojones to go out and do their own thing.
Yes.
And so some people would disagree with that, and that's okay. Everyone has a subjective opinion. We don't really care about that. The point of the matter is that the leadership, were not influenced by everyone else. And so...
It shouldn't be.
No. And we're still seeing, unfortunately, leaders and nations right at this minute still operating as if it's March 2020.
Yeah.
Actually not just operating, actually maybe even worse than March 2020, which is kind of strange. Kind of strange. It's like, let's move on. We've got this. It's time to move on and allow people to... And again, if you want to get on your high horse, you're listening to this and this and that, you're not seeing it also from the perspective of third world countries. This has done nothing for third world countries. There's going to be countries that are going to default financially. You're going to see the repercussions of this. So don't come out here on your woke high horse and you get in the comment section and start mentioning stuff like that, because you're not even thinking about it from the perspective of the third world, who have not agreed with any of these actions. We know people in that world.
Yeah, always those people have to be victims.
They have to be the victims of the first world.
Yes.
So don't jump on your high horse. You know.
Yeah, I mean, every time when we were to talk about these things, I get really, really angry because, I mean, if how pious they are as they promoting themselves, why aren't they care about those people as well? Just care for everybody.
They're our family.
You know.
This is the thing. This is the problem in the West. The West only identify with their immediate family. Without Chad, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Nepal, Bangladesh,
Sri Lanka,
Ecuador, Guatemala, these types of countries, you're nothing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
They're our family, man. And we let them down as the first world. And you want to jump around on your high horse. They're our family. You got to get out of this concept of, this is my immediate family. I protect them. What are you living in the cave times? We have evolved as a species to accept everyone as the one family. There's no nation, no race, no sex, no religion. We're all one family when you understand it at the core. One consciousness, actually.
Exactly. We all came from the same place and we are all going to the same place.
Yeah.
Why are we so different? We are not different.
And so if you don't take care of the entire community, then the society fails.
Exactly.
And that's what we're seeing. We didn't take care of the entire community, the world community. We only saw it from our little isolated view of this situation. Oh, my country's doing this. You got to get rid of the concept of my country. It's a concept. It's conceptual.
What I get, sometimes I have this strong resentment to some type of people who are they think they're so pious, they're always right, and they virtue signaling with the situation and whatnot. And I sometimes bring up how I don't understand why people can't see what's really happening in the third world countries. The last 2 years of time, where is the compensation for people who didn't make it?
Yeah. Yep.
If I say that, I don't get anything back. Why? Because they got nothing to provide. They become silent. But I see that whether they want to admit or they just don't want to converse anymore, it's just a total ignorance to me. Where is the compensation for those people who didn't make it? And and a lot of those countries will take forever to recover, to go back to where it was, right?
Yeah. It's going to take a long time, man. It's the world's been ruined.
That just breaks my heart for me. And actually, I firsthand starting to seeing these things from people, how they really don't care. Like when I bring,
they only care about their immediate
when I
environment.
bring up things like that, like, oh yeah, that's so sad, and that's it.
That's it, yeah.
You don't really give a goddamn, crap about people.
What did the pious, the pious mainstream media, governments, tech companies, who are supposed to be the leaders, right, in air quotes, why did they not highlight the fact that when all this nonsense began, in India, I'm using India just here because it happened in other countries, obviously, and we know the Indian environment. A lot of people live far away from their families in India. So they travel by train to, say, if they live in Bihar, their family's in Bihar, but they work in Mumbai. And there's been a bunch of these stories that I read a couple of years ago, that when this nonsense began, there's no work for them. There's no trains operating. There's nothing. They had to walk from Mumbai. And you know what happens to them? They don't make it.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter though, because it happened in India. Doesn't matter. And it's not anything to do with the situation. It's just someone died of no food and no water in the heat. Don't worry about it. We should just turn a blind eye. That's the world that we create, see? We don't take care of the entire community. You're not thinking about the entire community. in the third world, people live on very low wages. Like their survival is on very low wages, and you expect them to follow your course of action. It's morally reprehensible. And someone should have to answer for all of those things that happen. Like you said, there's tons of those stories, but we don't hear about it, you know.
I mean, even in developed country, to be honest, the people who lost their jobs and lost the business and this and that, and
suicide rates.
People don't talk about it.
No, not allowed to.
Conveniently.
Doesn't support the narrative. The people you're supposed to trust have failed you. They operate from the lowest level. And then what's going to happen over the years is people are going to despise them even more.
Yeah.
Because they're going to look at this situation. Because when the economic problems happen in a couple of years, and they're going to be big, trust me, they're going to be massive, the worst you'll have ever seen in history, then you'll start to look at the leaders through this time and the media companies and the other companies that start with a V who made a big benefit of this, and you're going to despise all of those because they were supposed to be the leaders, but they let you down because they didn't take care of the entire community.
Yes.
And Taoism is a holistic approach to take care of the entire community. It's getting out of the concept of mine, me, my, and it's more of a we, our, us.
Yes.
That's what it's about, man.
Yes.
And
Yes.
a proper leader understands from the highest level, it's only we, our, us. That's why they don't have to take credit. And they're actually happy that other people think in a unison, like we did it naturally. We did it together, you know. And we could have all done this together as well, but we didn't. Because we isolated our world to me, mine, and my.
And started from the top.
And it started from the top. Yeah, exactly. And so then the masses got infected with that type of psychosis.
Yeah.
And then we have the world that we have now, where no one trusts anyone. And that actually is necessary in some sense because the leaders let them down.
Big time.
Big time. So, and then it's going to go from not trusting them to despising them, and things will happen in the future because of the wrong courses of action through this period of time, and so forth and so on. But that's yet to be played out. And people probably think that you and I are just over-exaggerating, but we're not really. Because if you want to go and look at, for example, if you want to look at the Sri Lankan economy and this and that, and you think that countries don't default, you better think again. So,
yeah, I mean, we watched this individual's video once that how his neighbor found,
hanging off the...
Yeah. That's just like...
That's heartbreaking.
A
friend of ours in Thailand, in Chiang Mai.
And he just sometimes see him and saying hello every now and then.
Jovial guy.
Yeah. Thai person.
Yeah. Big fella. Big
and guy. Found by someone who living across the road or something. Found himself.
It's terrible.
That's just like, I don't know.
Hanging from the air conditioning unit. Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? But that's the way that...
It's hard not to resent the government and also the people who actually support their decisions. And again, like I said, it happened in the first world country too. The people just don't want to see it. They don't want to listen. What's important is what's happening on the phone, really. No.
With the stupid C word. Not the C-U-N-T, but the other stupid C word. That's the only thing that's important. Everything else is secondary.
Yeah.
Oh, the guy hanging off the air conditioning unit in Thailand, why does that matter? Well, it matters because his income was taken away. You took his livelihood away. You humiliated him.
Young person too. And
Thailand is not a first world country, man.
And that's just one incident out of who knows how many, really.
Geez. I mean, it's funny though. We all know someone who knows someone, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's funny. Like, you just hear these stories that we all know. Sadly, someone who knows someone. So.
Yeah, that's why sometimes hard to keep faith to humanity. I have to say it. Yeah.
But
where the world is going.
Well, it's everything from the top down, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you don't trust the leaders, you don't trust the society. If the leaders don't trust the people, then we have an eventual outcome. And the eventual outcome is that we disappear. And so, and people will think that's an exaggeration, but it's not an exaggeration.
No, actually, it might not that far away if we keep going this way, you know.
People always say, you know, how are we going to end? Like the dinosaurs with an asteroid or this and that. And it's like, well, if we keep going the way that we're going, it will self-implode. We'll kill each other.
We'll do it to ourselves, isn't it?
And everyone who is tearing up the fabric of society, media companies, tech companies that we're talking on right now, the government, are contributing to that. And they don't know it. They don't know it. If you read the I Ching, you understand how the I Ching work and how things fit together, psychologically, physically, metaphysically, then they're all contributing to that eventual outcome. And that's why it's important. I know with the small audience that we have here on the podcast and that, it's important though to engage in these sorts of conversations, to keep your mind focused on peace and equanimity, and because that is going to bode well for a positive future. Not having an overly exaggerated opinion, you know.
It does not matter.
No. Your opinion, your subjective view of the world in the end doesn't matter. You're not that important. Stop thinking that you're that important. You're no more important than an ant. Humans get confused that they have some sort of superiority on this planet or in the universe. You don't. When you understand everything goes together, you are no more important than an ant. So don't exaggerate your subjective views, your opinions of the world. Try to be a friend of the world. Try to live with peace.
Yes.
And do it genuinely. Don't put on a show. Don't have fake humility, fake genuineness. Actually embody it. Embody the peace and harmony. You're going to make mistakes, but that's when you need to let go of resentment and forgive and so forth and so on. And people just don't do it these days. We have it all the time with my work, right? I might say something that someone doesn't agree with, and then they resent me forever. And it's like, well, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Because it's that person's problem, really. Sure, I probably said the wrong thing, according to them. I mean, it's a subjective perspective, right? But they just are not willing to. It's, again, negativity bias. You do one thing, even though you've done all this good, and they just throw you in the bin. And so that's definitely no reciprocal trust.
Again, like we talk about this a lot, like how, I mean, can you imagine if that something like that happened in the real physical world? Like, I mean, how many times you bump into like just a small argument over something not that important with somebody, and after they just get on with each other. Like sometimes there is disagreement between people. That's just a part of nature. Sometimes
Are you not an adult?
Exactly, and we get to get over it, and sometimes you disagree on some things, but you're still friends. It's all good. But online, like I find it, people like they have this like a alter persona,
alter
ego, that they have this some sort of mask on, and like like I'm so disappointed you were like this and you said this and that, and like, but you would never be like that in person. Seriously.
No.
Like,
and we've met people. People have said things to me online, and I saw them offline. I said, and just go straight up. You remember when you said that? Oh yeah, sorry, man. Sorry about that. And it's like, why say it in the first place? Like, so when you hit them up in the real world, they cower away, and it's like, you have to be one person. You have to be a consistent person. You can't be a person online and a person offline. That's a psychosis. And this is what people are doing. They're developing this subtle psychosis.
100%.
and they're not aware of it, and then everyone has to then deal with it. So if you're on the path and you want to trust and you want to have equanimity and you want to build peace in the world, you need to be one consistent person.
Yes.
And be a friend to the world. Say hello to someone. Smile at someone today. Just do simple things.
Exactly.
Everyone's doing the best they can with the tools at their disposal in this life. And we can all live together in harmony and peace if we trust each other and, mind our own business and treat people with respect and understand that people think differently and people have different cultures and tradition. This is just the way it is, and it's cool. It actually it's what brings flavor and color to the life, As Alan Watts said, variety is the spice of life,
Again, when you were talking about that human evolution, the evolution could only happen the diversity of a culture.
Yeah.
Without it, we're not here. There is no new information coming through different territories around the world.
Yeah.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Diversity, the different culture, different way of thinking, all these things are essential for evolution of humanity, really.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, man, to talk about life from different perspectives. You learn things. The reason why you and I do this, we've learned many different traditions and cultures. We've lived in those places and we've learned a lot, particularly from traveling, right?
Yes.
Living in places like India, Nepal, Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, wherever we've been,
Yeah.
And so we've learned so much in those places, and you gain a different worldview and perspective because we are different, but that's the differences are minor in comparison to our similarities. The differences just make us see it a different way, which helps us grow psychologically. But our similarities are vast.
Yeah.
And no one's highlighting our similarities anymore. It's all about focusing on differences.
Nah. You gotta just learn from different culture how they function on certain things, how they operate certain things under that culture or this culture, and you can actually see how amazing it is.
Yep.
All these different culture, they do things different way, but all just works harmoniously, perfectly. We should learn from those different culture instead of making clear distinction from this culture, that culture, this religion, that religion. It's just a pointless exercise.
Yeah. If you're an adult, you know fully about accepting. Acceptance is supposed to be part of being an adult.
Yeah.
And what I see in the world a lot this day and age is a lot of adult children. They don't accept each other. They're fighting. When I see all this stuff, I'm just like, nah. Anyway. So, a lot of adults pretending to be adults, but deep down they're just a child who still needs an authority figure to keep them in check.
Yeah, they get triggered too easy, aren't they? Just like children.
Just like children, emotional about nothing.
Yes.
Instead of just accepting, minding your own business, loving each other. Real love. Loving them means accepting them. It means accepting them for what they are. And if they're not incurring any harm on you or any harm on themselves, shanti, shanti, shanti. All is good. Okay, guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.